everyone to Coach Unboxed. This is a project by Unboxed Sports, an agency elevating professional tour tennis coaches on and off the court. I'm Yannick Yoshizawa, and today I'm joined by John Williams, pro tour tennis coach of Taylor Townsend, who he won 2 Grand Slams with. Also an entrepreneur, being the founder and chief clarity coach at Elevate with John, as well as the founder and chief performance officer at Accent Sports Performance. It's a lot of titles here to start with. Welcome, John. Appreciate you coming in. You're actually on this side of the pond because usually you do live in Portugal. Me being Brazilian, I always have that connection. I know you're working on your Portuguese, but where you're at now on this side of the Atlantic, the Atlantic. Ooh.
Yes, actually, I'm in your backyard. Actually, I'm in Florida.
I heard your son just got his driving test done. I hope he passed. No crashes, so that is always a positive.
He did. He kept the family record intact. First try success. So we're happy for him.
Oh, that's awesome. John, but you're actually from New York, is that correct?
That's correct. Originally from New York, moved to Georgia in 2004. Left Atlanta area in 2020 to move to Portugal.
Wow. Okay. But let's start before we get to the current John Williams. Your upbringing, how was it? What were you into? What was your childhood like? How did you get into sports? If you did it at a young age or a later age, tell me a little bit of your childhood and teenage years.
Wow, we're going back.
Yes,
just out of the womb. I love that. Okay, so I'm the youngest of 4. I grew up predominantly with my youngest sister, who's 4 years older than I. Raised in suburban New York on Long Island. I was super active, needed to always be doing something, couldn't sit still. Today would probably have, 6 or 7 diagnoses surrounding that. But I was basically a high energy, healthy kid that needed physical activity in order to be balanced, right? So we did everything outside. My mom was a big advocate of not being inside when you could be outside. So we were always in nature. We were building, forts, playing in tree houses, climbing trees, just running through the neighborhood back when it was safe for you to be able to actually play as kids outside in the neighborhood. So that was the majority of my youth exposure to, activities and things athletic. Being the youngest in my sibling group, but also typically being the youngest or one of the youngest in my peer group brought with it a certain degree of competitiveness. And I always had something to prove because the older, bigger kids were older and bigger. So if we wanted to play with them, we had to show that we were as good or potentially better than they were. So that is where I believe my competitive fire began, usually rooted in a lot of frustration because when you're learning how to do something, you're not very good at it. Mm-hmm. And that means that you're getting bested a lot. Your performance is simply just not good enough. So you don't make the cut and you have to learn how to deal with that. And I became a very, very poor loser.
Hey, it's not always a bad thing, right? Like, I think it drives people in different ways. Were there specific sports or activities that you got really into it, or did you bounce around also because of your older siblings and whatnot?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we did everything. So, the big 3, football, baseball, basketball, they were commonplace. Ironically, and I say ironically because the reason we moved to Portugal was because my son was pursuing a career as a professional footballer. I didn't know anything about football, soccer. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anybody that played. But yeah, predominantly it was basketball and football. By the time I was coming close to graduating from high school, I had started delving into racquetball a little bit and then kind of got serious in racquetball right after high school and ended up playing quite a bit post high school, early years of college. So
graduating, I have this. I mean, it sounds like a pretty good childhood, teenage years, just evolving your body, your mind, as you said, being the younger one, I'm sure you learned a lot. As you were graduating from high school, what's your mindset then? Like, did you have any sort of clue on what did you want to do as you were living your teenage years and you're trying to figure out what to do with your life?
I had no one around me to kind of tell me how good I was or the potential that I had. I was at 5'7" I could dunk a basketball off of one step.
Whoa.
I could dribble equally good with both hands. Like, you could not tell by looking at me what was my dominant hand. Football, I played wide receiver. Because I could jump, I could catch almost everything. My brother just instilled in me that if you can touch it, you can catch it. So I just adapted to figure out how not to get yelled at by him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But bigger than that, I never had anybody around me. My parents were always like, go to school, get a good education, get a good job.
Yeah.
They were predominantly blue collar workers and predominantly blue collar mindset.
Yeah.
So I never had anybody to say, hey, you could actually go to university or to college on an athletic scholarship. I never had anybody that said that to me. So I never even thought about that. So to answer your question, as I'm getting close to graduating high school, I'm already in business. I've already owned 3 companies at that point.
Whoa. What were they?
At 16, I was running a landscaping company that I grew from myself pushing a lawnmower through the neighborhood cutting grass. So I had like 32 kids working for me. We would buy, because I didn't have any startup capital. I had like $20.
Yeah.
That was my startup capital, right?
Yeah.
I had to go through the neighborhood, and we would just find discarded lawn equipment, like power equipment, old lawnmowers and stuff that people were throwing out, and I would bring them home and fix them, bring them back to life, and that's what my employees would use.
Yeah.
None of us can drive, so we're literally pulling old shopping carts that I cobbled back together through the neighborhood on bicycles. That's how the crew got to their addresses and did their work. So at 16, I had already been an entrepreneur for a year and a half.
Yeah.
I had already figured out how to scale my little operation, and I already figured out the significance of consistency and customer service and communication and all of those things. So when I got to the point where now I'm driving, I'm 17, I get my license, I get my first car, which I did all by myself. I had zero help from my parents. So I bought my first car. I paid my own car insurance. I put all the gas in. And that was not something that was kind of told to me in advance. It was kind of a situation where my parents said, no, you're going to do this on your own. You need to figure out how to do this on your own. So I did. And from that point forward, really, I knew, okay, business. It's just going to be business. So I graduated high school, no aspirations to play sport at any level beyond, really recreationally, to be honest, and moved to Virginia and started a marketing company that was kind of catered towards small businesses, and ran that company for 3.5 years before I moved back to New York.
And you're going through this entrepreneur business, and I want also you to touch, because as we're heading to the tennis aspect of it, of having to figure it out on your own, as a 16, 17-year-old, I'm sure that might not be the nicest thing to hear from your parents, but at the same time, looking back now, was it one of the best lessons that they ever taught you? And did you not even think about college, or did you do college while you were working and running this marketing, or were you like, I'm just gonna focus on this and continue to figure it out and do my own education per se?
Yeah, so first, I'll talk about the lesson. Yes, one of the most invaluable lessons was kind of throwing your kid into the pool and say, you're either going to swim or you're going to drown. A lot of the lessons that stick with me today and still drive me, that created the foundation for who I am, those lessons were given in that regard, either by my parents or by the world, right? Or by the environment that I was operating in at the time. But those are the lessons that created the foundation for me to build everything that I've done on top of. So I'm extremely grateful for those. I did not like them at the time. As a matter of fact, I was very, very upset. I was distraught many times when those lessons came in, but there's no way I would go back and change anything, for sure. Your second part of your question, college. Yes. So I had already decided that business was going to be my path forward, and that is going to be my success route. I did not look at college as a mandatory.
Hmm.
However, I was very interested in learning.
Yeah.
So what I decided was, well, if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to go on my own terms. I'm going to take the courses that I want. I'm going to
Yeah.
get into the classes that I'm interested in, so on and so forth. So I did pay my way through college, and I broke it up in little pieces over time, but it was always work, and my business was primary.
Now that you look back, you had all these physical abilities. You eventually head into, I'm going to say, and you can correct me here, into the fitness industry or health and wellness industry. Did you start finding that passion or drive? Was it a combination? What led you into that part of your life?
So physical activity, physical betterment, let's say, physical competition, that was always a part of my life. Regardless of what I was doing, let's just say work-wise, there was always the underpinning of physical activity. So I was always in the gym or exercising or playing a sport or multiple sports. That was a constant throughout my life. The way that I actually got into formalized coaching in the strength and conditioning, the physical performance industry was largely due to my wife, believe it or not. So I was racing motorcycles professionally at the time, which I did for 6.5 years.
Why are you running a company, or were you dedicated fully into that at that point?
I was running a company, but the company was basically, I was all consumed with racing, and I figured out how to turn a business into something that could support and fund my racing. So basically, I built race engines. I worked on motorcycles, eventually opening a repair shop on my own. And I did that solely for the purpose of being able to fund my racing effort.
Wow.
So now I could play with motorcycles all day, and still make money, so I could go racing on the weekends.
Yeah.
I was racing before I met her, so maybe I was probably 2 years in at this point, and met her. We started dating. It was the winter, and I'm still in New York. So there's no racing. There's nothing going on motorcycle wise in the winter. Right. So I'm looking for a part-time job to supplement my income so that I could start saving money to go racing in the spring. So I'm at her house, and we happen to be looking through, this is going to date me a little bit, but we actually are looking through the classified section of a newspaper. I don't know if many people remember what that is, but she looks through the newspaper. She finds this ad for personal trainer / desk attendant at a country club that was near where we lived. It was like 20 minutes away, and it was part-time. It had the shift was like 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. or something like that. So I'm thinking, that's amazing. I start early in the morning, and I'm done in the mid-afternoon. I can still get a whole bunch of stuff done for the rest of the day. I end up getting the job. So I'm doing that for a while. And while I'm there, I become this voracious reader, because literally I'm sitting at a desk for 8 hours at a shift, right? And occasionally I have to get up and show someone how to turn on a treadmill or turn the channel on the TV. I'm really just babysitting the desk. So I'm literally consuming, no exaggeration, probably 2 to 3 books a week.
Wow.
And this goes on for probably 3 or 4 months. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the personal.
Were you specifically about a certain topic, or how were you choosing those books?
Everything. It was everything. So self-improvement, on training, some on racing, it was just varied.
Okay.
I mean, I started reading Nietzsche. I started reading Rumi. So the list was super varied at that point. But I was really interested in the nutrition end, and I was really interested in the training end. About 3 months in, I have observed these personal trainers with their clients operating at the country club. And I just sit back and look, and I'm like, wow, I could do so much better.
Yeah.
So I went and I sat for my first certification with 7 hours of studying, because I didn't find out that they only gave the test back then. There was no online testing. They only did these tests, maybe once or twice a month. So it's Thursday now. I find out that they're having the test on Saturday morning in Manhattan. So you could register whenever you wanted, pay your fee. You can sit for the exam. If you fail, you fail.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, well, it's either this or I have to wait another month. So I crammed and went there, sat for the exam. I got 75%, 70% was passing. So I got my first certification. And at that point, I was kind of hooked, because I was really disappointed with what was in the certification. This is not teaching me how to train people. So I figured there was much more to learn.
Yeah.
And then my reading opportunities became much more specific. Now it was everything about anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, kinesiology, nutrition, the central nervous system, the way that the organs function, overall health and wellness. I dove headfirst into that rabbit hole and went really, really deep, really, really fast. That increased my level of knowledge and comfortability like exponentially in a very, very short period of time.
I'm fascinated. So your level of learning, it's incredible. And I think it shows if you're dedicated and you have a passion for learning and see that you can improve something within yourself, that's possible. And it's possible within a time frame. So now when I head into, because this fascinates me, into tennis, we have talked zero tennis, right?
Right.
And we bring this specifically of tennis coaches. And I want to get into maybe this first transition here on how did you first heard about tennis and how you transitioned in yourself and it's like, wow, there's an opportunity here and I believe I can help tennis athletes.
Again, an interesting story. So I'm back in New York now, and I open up now. I've been on the fitness side, performance training side for several years now, and I opened my own first gym.
Okay.
And within that period, because I worked at a country club, so golf and tennis, right?
Yeah.
So I became pretty close with several of the tennis pros and coaches and players. In the summertime, they would have college kids from overseas come in to be hitting partners and help work at the club. I had a couple of clients who were recreational tennis players. They were in their late 30s, early to mid 40s. So it was kind of around that demographic. Up to that point, when I opened my first facility, I opened it next to Harry Hopman's Tennis Center, which was then Port Washington Tennis Academy. That's where McEnroe started playing. I didn't know that. It was purely coincidental, but literally it was right next door. Like, we got a fair amount of tennis kids. And we started developing programming. I started looking at energy systems and how it was done, like how that was being trained. And I was like, no, that's all wrong. It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why they would be doing it this way. It's an acyclic sport. You know, it's predominantly anaerobic with a huge anaerobic base component, but you guys are sprinting. It's a sprint, stop, sprint, stop, sprint, stop. Why don't we train them more like ice hockey players? Because the game mimics that more from a physiological perspective. And people thought I was crazy. And then when our kids started dominating, they didn't think I was crazy anymore. So that is where the tennis began. Now, none of those kids really were what I would call high-level players. That didn't happen to me until I moved in 2004 to Georgia. I took a sabbatical. I was still attached to my gym in New York. So I was dealing with that from an admin perspective and management perspective, but from afar. And I had kind of taken a sabbatical from any of the face-to-face stuff. I wasn't doing that. But I did have an obligation to a football player from New York who I had given my word to prepare him for his pro day. I said, I'm moving to Atlanta, but if you want to come down when it's time for you to prep for your pro day, I will work with you. I will do it. So he came down and did that. The gym that we trained in, because I didn't have a facility of my own, the gym that we trained in was attached to a tennis club. Okay. And the gym owner saw what I was doing with him, really liked it, respected me. We had a great rapport. He said, you need to meet this guy named Greg over at my tennis club. And Greg and I hit it off immediately. Greg happened to be working with a young female player. She was a little girl at the time. She was 10 years old, but her name was Grace Min. And Grace.
Great person.
Yeah, great person. So that's shortly after that, Grace and I started working together. And then that was my foray into junior tennis, but at a much more consistently high level.
Very curious about this because you said, and this happens in many sports or outside of sports with nutrition. You see a lot of things that happen the way they're trained, the way people eat, that have been done for so long. And you notice this in New York where this doesn't make sense. But tell me your opinion on why do people do it? If it didn't make sense to you, I'm assuming that it didn't make sense to a lot of people, but is that lack of knowledge? Is that because one person did that way and they had success and people followed? Because when you talk about hockey and tennis of the sprinting, the short stops, it definitely makes sense to train that way.
Wish I had an answer for that, Yannick. That would save me a lot of headache and head shaking for sure. But the closest I can come to it is that many people are satisfied with doing it the way that it's already been done. So if it's always been done that way and people are comfortable with that, they'll just keep doing it because it's much easier to go with the tide than it is to stand up and fight the tide. I have never, ever, ever been one to just go with the tide. And that's why if you look at my career trajectory and the things that I've been involved in, I am the guy that will happily jump both feet into something that I'm very interested in, but know nothing about, because I know what it takes. And it doesn't take a lot to move from a place of not knowing or not having a significant amount of skill in the area to being able to change that. Yeah. Now I know a lot more and I've developed some skills, and you just keep building on that if it's something you're genuinely interested in. So there was this huge movement a while ago about, don't pursue money, don't pursue fame, pursue your passions, and those other things will come. I think you should certainly pursue some passions. I think you should pursue your interests first and foremost, because if you're deeply interested in it, then motivation is not going to be a problem. And the trick is finding out where your interests become sustainable for the life you want to lead. Not everybody wants to have $1 million in the bank and 7 houses around the world and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, that's cool. If you're not working for that, then theoretically you're happy. So
yes, that's
there we go.
Great answer. All right, let's get back to tennis. Now you're in Atlanta. You do get to work with another Georgia athlete there that starts heading into the pros, very talented as well as Donald. But talk more about this transition and how you start getting into the tour part of your life of tennis.
The way that I was introduced to Donald was through a girl that he was dating at the time, who was a client of mine, who ended up getting a 4-year scholarship to Arizona State to play tennis. We had turned Sienna into basically a beast. She was a machine that allowed her the opportunity to play 4 years at Arizona. That intro led me to Donald. I started working with Donald. He had some really good results fairly quickly, which showed the differences in physicality and athleticism. And that gave me my first glimpse as to tour life. I traveled with him 2008, 2009. I can't remember what year for sure. Several months before the US Open, we started working together. Mm-hmm. Traveled with him to New York, kept working together after that. Mainly when he was in town, back and forth. When he was out of town, I would program for him. And then 2015, I traveled to every event, every slam for sure, and several of the other Masters events with him. So that gave me my insight into tour life, the operations, etc. And then we fast forward, Donald ended up introducing me to Taylor. Taylor, came to me because we had started working together in like 2013, 2014, and it didn't last very long. And we reconnected in 2017, and she contacted me because she wanted me to get her ready. She wanted to do her preseason with me in advance of the Australian Open.
And just to clarify here, with Donald and Taylor, you were 100% focused on strength conditioning, fitness.
Correct, physical side. Physical side. I get Taylor ready for 2017 Aussie Open. She has pretty good results. We continue working together after that. Now it's 2019, 2020, and she finds out that she's pregnant.
Yeah.
Surprise. And she comes to me and says, listen, I need you to help me navigate this. And I laughed and I was like, well, you're not going to be playing tennis at 8 months. So she said, no, the entire pregnancy. So that was my work at that point. I basically helped her map out the entire pregnancy from a physical and physiological perspective, how she needed to eat, what she needed to eat, the exercises that we could do kept her. I mean, at 8.5 months, she was in the gym still 3 days a week. We were training.
I think it's a hot topic now, and you've seen at the WTA a lot of mothers coming back to the tour and actually being quite successful. And I think when people talk about getting pregnant, and it's a huge journey for the woman. If you can just give me, maybe for just tennis players here in itself, but just for also the general knowledge, is there a couple general tips of advices when you worked with Taylor? Um, what were a couple things that you would say that people should focus on during that phase, especially if their intention is to come back at a very high physical level when they are back and out of, or I guess, postpartum?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing would be obviously nutrition, because everything you need to grow a human has to be provided nutritionally. Otherwise, it's going to take it from your body. So if there's no surplus, if there's no excess of those nutrients, then you're going to be at a deficit. And now you're going to have to deal with things like prenatal instances of osteoporosis and osteopenia, because the calcium that the baby needs to grow bones and a skeleton, it has to get from somewhere. So it's going to take it from your bones. So making sure that nutritionally all your bases are covered is critically important. I tell people that if you are planning to get pregnant, then before you actually start the process, dedicate yourself to getting in the best shape of your life, the best possible physical condition you can be in, because it's a lot of work to grow another human inside of you. Yeah. Like you, I've not done it personally, but I've seen it from the outside several times. And I understand physiologically what's required. So the better shape you're in, the better condition your body is in to handle and manage stress, the easier it will be for you and the better it will be for baby. Yeah. Lastly, mobility and strength. Two big things that are hugely important. Mobility in the lower torso, the hips, the pelvic region, the legs, and strengthen those regions as well will do a tremendous amount to help when it's time for baby to slide out into the world.
Well, yeah. And I'm sure when you were on this process with Taylor, it meant a lot to you as you're a father yourself. Well, talking a little bit of this postpartum, which I believe she became a mom in 2021, I believe that she asked you to take even a bigger role into her phase of not coming back only on that physical aspect, but also on the mental part of her game. Talk me through this phase of coming back on the tour, and also maybe that conversation that, she has new priorities of her life as well, but at the same time, I believe she wanted even to get even better, right?
So apparently in my life, I'm a big fan of moving to a different place, but still having a business in the place that I've left. So we were living in Portugal at this point, and I'm back here back there in Atlanta, and doing some work in the gym, and I'm working with Taylor, and she says, I'd like you to coach me. And I'm laughing and joking, and I'm like, I have been coaching you for years. What are you talking about? She's like, no, I want you to be my tennis coach. And I said, you do realize I don't play tennis, right? And she said, yeah, that's why I want you to coach me. Because the things that you've taught me, movement-wise, footwork-wise, position-wise, the questions you've asked me, nobody's ever done those things before. And she said that perspective is going to allow me to get back to the top of my game and be better, hopefully, than I was before, because that's my goal. I want to be better post-pregnancy than I was. So that was the conversation. There were a couple of other little colorful bits in there, because I couldn't commit right away. I just committed to my family to, be in Portugal with them. So yeah. Now you want me to travel all over the world with you and this and that, like that wasn't in my plan. So I need to run this by them. And I said, I'll get back to you. And I did talk to the family, and fast forward, here we are. So she didn't ask me to come in on the mental side. She asked me to come in on the tennis side.
As the full part of it, right? I think you brought the whole package in a way.
I think if you asked her again, she would probably reconsider her proposal to me and say, just want you to do tennis. Because in the beginning, the mental side, the mental side was really tough, because I was challenging everything and creating opportunities for her to challenge those things as well. And then putting her in positions where those things were going to show up. So there literally was no place to hide from me, because I understood the game. I understood competitive, sport, and I understand the human mind and the human psyche fairly well.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, because, I want this not to be taken in any wrong way, but did you ever feel did you ever see yourself as a tennis coach? Did you ever feel the imposter syndrome of something that maybe you didn't play, or, you didn't build your career on? Mm-hmm. You're seeing yourself on an environment that a lot of these coaches have come from a different background than yours. And you mentioned, say, hey, I don't have to have that validation of going on that same wave, but I'm sure it's not it's like someone coming into the fitness space that has never trained someone. And did you feel like, what were the areas that you felt that you like, okay, I have to improve with this? Or were you on the tennis court playing yourself as well, to understand that part? Talk to me that transition for you.
I explained to Taylor when this is during the conversation before I said yes. When I came back to her, I said, let me make some things very clear because I want to manage expectations and I want us to continue our relationship of, clear, transparent communication. There are some things that here's where I feel like I can provide value. The areas that I feel like I can provide value in, those values are going to be exceptionally high. And then there are other areas that I cannot provide value in. And if those areas are more important to you, then this is not going to work. I don't play tennis. I'm not going to hit.
Yeah.
So if that's an area that's important to you, then we can stop talking right now and we can pivot to another direction. We'll find another solution. You obviously know I don't have a tennis background as a player, but I do have an enormous tennis background as an observer of multiple coaches who have coached at every possible level and successfully at that level, like the highest they could at their respective levels over many years. So I understand the mechanics of the game because it's just physics. I understand the tactics because it's competition. It's one of my naturally occurring strong suits. So I've never had imposter syndrome. That doesn't even, like, intellectually, I understand what it is, but there's a simple solution to that. You just learn and skill up and be dedicated to being better, knowing more and being better. A lot of coaches would look at this, and this is not to be offensive to anyone. I didn't travel the traditional path of a professional tennis coach. Most coaches start at the sidewalk, they walk up the front steps into the front door, and that begins their professional coaching career. Well, the sidewalk and the front steps, that's usually your playing career, right?
Yeah.
I came in through the side window. But the difference is I know the path through the front door. I know what the roof looks like. I know what the basement looks like. I know what the back of the house looks like. I have had 360-degree top to bottom perspective on everything. I understand how important it is for that house to exist on a solid foundation, what that foundation needs to consist of in order to be sustainable. I know how to build it. I also know how to repair it. Our society is not really set up for people like me because I'm an anomaly, right? They're uncomfortable with people that are truly multidimensional. I don't entertain that. I don't let that bother me or affect me. I know my limits. I respect my limitations. And that's how I show respect to the other coaches that have spent their 30 years doing this. Okay, great.
And I want to the validation here after the US Open in 2023, where Taylor had some great wins, and she gave an interview where she said, and I quote, "We both bet on each other at that time in 2021. And it's really nice to know that I'm out here with somebody that really has my back and cares about me as a person first." Now, thinking about your journey today, do you feel more of a sense of accomplishment on what you all have done, or more of a unfinished business with what can still come out of this partnership?
Can I say both? Because I genuinely feel both. I am extremely proud and happy with what we've accomplished so far, with the person Taylor has become, also the player that Taylor has become. I'm extremely happy for her level of understanding of herself and her understanding of the game now, because she didn't have any of that when we started working together. So to think that I had and played a significant role in that is very gratifying for me. But at the same time, one of my core skills, if you will, from the physical side was being able to fairly accurately assess top line performance. And I kind of parlayed that into, once I understood psychology a little bit more and getting into understanding a person's mind, and as I said earlier, kind of how humans operate, then I was able to kind of put those together and really say, okay, you have what it takes to be really good, or no, you'll be good, but you won't be one in the world good. You know what I mean? And that's not to say I've been right 100% of the time, but also I have not been wrong 100% of the time. So we'll just leave it there for that. But I say that to say that as far as we've come, Taylor can go so much further. And I am challenged and driven to help her continue moving toward that destination.
That's a great answer. And during that partnership with Taylor, and as she was playing with Siniakova, and Katerina has had great success in doubles from different partners. Tell me, how has it been for you and Taylor? Were there few takeaways that you learned from that partnership that you continue to take on as a coach and Taylor as a player as well? And you don't share a lot of the secrets maybe, but are there certain keys on terms of preparation for tournaments and recovery that you always focus on?
So the first question, takeaways from her partnership with Katerina. First, yes, Katerina's a beast. I think she's got 11 slam titles or something like that now to her credit. Amazing. Her ability to play with other players is a testament to how well she understands the team dynamic, right? And her ability to adapt within like real time to that team dynamic. She can immediately assess what her partner is really good at, their strengths and weaknesses, and she can adjust to cover those weaknesses a little bit and relax and fall back to allow her partner to express her strengths. A lot of these attributes I quickly identified because they were familiar, because Taylor has the ability to do the same thing, which is one of the things that makes their partnership so formidable as a unit. Just as a method of recollection here, Taylor went to the finals of the French with Layla. That was 23. The year before that, she went to the finals of the US Open with Katie McNally. So these were, or I may be getting the years wrong, but that was the order of operation. And then we finally get across the finish line at Wimbledon, which was amazing. And we knock out the start of this year, 2025, with a title at the Australian Open. When that happened, pre-match, leading me to your second part of the question, pre-match Australian Open, I said to Taylor, you've been here before. You know what to do. You don't have to play out of your mind ungodly. You just need to play your game. That's it. And she said afterwards, you didn't say anything about expecting me to win. And I said, why would I? That's obvious. You two together, you should win everything all the time. You're that good, like as a team. You know what I mean? That's genuinely how I feel. Now, whether or not that's actually going to happen, this is sport, right? Not everybody plays their best every time they step on the court. However, the probability is always there. And that's what I work for. I work to cultivate in her mind, in her understanding, how can you consistently play your best tennis the most consistently? So I want to play my best tennis, and I want to play that level as much as possible. That's what we train for. That's what we talk about. We talk about the things that contribute to that. I put out on socials a little while ago, pre-match, I think it was before the quarters or down in Miami. I was reading Taylor a Dr. Seuss book. But
that was great.
You know, it was obviously that's not the entirety of our pre-match, right?
Yes.
But the whole concept is when you understand who you are as a player, when you understand how to play the game your way, then what are you worried about?
Yeah.
Right? This, like, I come from, and this is again, you know, we were talking about perspective. The sports that I spent the most time involved in were life or death consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a scar from racing motorcycles. I don't complain about this.
Yeah.
But the consequences every time I swung a leg over the bike, that could be, when I'm saying bye to the people in my pit, that could be the very last time. And everybody knows that. But nobody kept that in the front of their mind more than me.
Yeah.
So tennis is not like that. So when you don't have that level of consequence, what are you really stressing out about?
Yeah.
Conceptually, I don't get that.
Yeah.
Coco spoke to that in a press conference she did a while ago, where she's like, this is not pressure. Pressure is, you know, a mother or a father trying to figure out how to keep the lights on or keep their kids fed. Like, that's real pressure. This is a game.
Yeah. It's a privilege too, right? To get to that point. So
correct.
And then talking a little bit about this, you coming from a tennis background, winning Wimbledon, many people would be out of the moon because the most traditional. How did you grasp that moment? And how did Taylor also grasp that moment of winning that title on that court?
To be honest, this is going to sound probably crazy to most of the coaches, because most of the coaches traditionally aspire to win slam titles. And like, that's their aspiration. They want to work with players that win these big events. And Wimbledon has got a massive amount of prestige and history in the domain and arena of tennis. I get it, but I'm not one of those guys.
Yeah.
It's a competition. I'm a competitor. I want to win everything that I play, everything that I enter. I want to win all the time. Every single thing. 100%. No exception.
Yeah.
The fact that we actually won it, great. Okay. Now I'm immediately back to the laboratory. I'm deconstructing the victory. What did we do well? What could we do better? How do we train those things so that those things that we did well show up more consistently? And the things that we could do better, we figure out a way to improve in that vertical as well.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I didn't appreciate it. I appreciated it tremendously. I was lucky enough to have my family there with me. My son was in the box with me, at the finals. So saw everything. Like, it was huge. And because of my son's previous involvement in football, commitment wise on both of our behalves, there are a lot of time, like, we had to spend a lot of time apart. So he didn't really have the opportunity to be included into that part of my life. And for him to be present at that moment when I, a WTA professional coach, win my first slam, that was magical. It'll never be forgotten by me.
Yes.
Right. But I'm already on to the next. My philosophy, I never get too high on the highs and I don't get too low on the lows, because they both come. So I want to be a surfer. I want to ride the big waves, but when I get dumped, I want to paddle back, find my board, get back up again.
Yeah.
And not just lay there floating, lamenting over, oh man, that could have been epic.
Yes.
You know?
John, we talked so much about all your experiences in tennis, outside of tennis, and I want to grasp your outside and also insider opinion on what you've seen, both from the fitness to the mental to the tennis perspective. Where do you think the tennis world, or if you want to be more specific about the tours themselves, what do you believe that can change and evolve in the tennis industry for improvement in those areas?
All right. So you want me to put my business hat back on?
Yeah.
Fair enough. The first thing is, the tennis format has to change. And I'm not a traditionalist, but I'm also not a rebel in that regard. The only reason I say the tennis format has to change is if you're going to grow the sport, then just like everything else, it has to evolve to attract new blood. And with the new blood being today's youth, predominantly, you have to meet them where they are to some extent. You have to hook them. And the way to hook them is not matches that last 5.5 hours. It's not going to happen with scoring that doesn't make sense to anybody outside of tennis. So that has to change. And there are things in place. I say things. There are organizations in place. There are formats in place that are looking to do that. Make that more exciting. Crowd engagement. Tennis is a professional sport that happens worldwide. There's another one that also falls into that category. It's called football or soccer. You don't hear dead silence at any football matches. Mm-hmm. When they're taking penalty kicks to decide who's going to win the match, the most critical moments in the entire match, right? The crowds are going absolutely insane. But in a tennis match, we still want to preserve that traditional, outdated mindset that you have to be able to hear a pin drop. I don't understand. Spectators are there because they're excited about watching players do like incredible things with a racket and ball, right? But they can't express themselves. So that's a source of frustration. They don't know when to cheer, when to be quiet, because they don't want to create, a problem. That creates an environment of discomfort for the spectator. If your spectator is uncomfortable, then why are they going to come back? And why are they going to bring 20 or 30 of their friends? So that's immediately a conflict in supporting the growth of the game. Yeah. That's where I feel like it has to go from this point if it's going to continue to grow and evolve. You asked me about the physical side as well. Sports performance has come a long way. The fact that we actually see athletes doing a proper warm up and a structured warm up and a structured cool down now consistently, and it's pretty much all across the board, almost at every level, is great. The fact that we are incorporating and now catching up to valuing recovery, post-activity recovery, also great. The tours have recovery centers and things like that set up, which is awesome. I will, just to throw this out to the ATP and the WTA, back in 2006, I made all of these recommendations. So I'm glad you guys
Yay.
finally caught up.
20 years.
Right. Exactly. But we see all of those things now, which is really cool. It's great for the players because, as we can see historically, the longevity in the sport and being able to operate at the higher level is a direct result of that. The one area that needs to improve dramatically across the board on both sides is where's the off season. So there's no true downtime for the players, and that presents a problem. Doesn't matter what the sport is. That needs to be sorted, because for players that are basically have to compete at the level that they do, enduring surface changes, climate changes, all of those things for, essentially 11 months out of the year, 11 and a half months if you're playing Billie Jean King Cup or, you know what I mean? Like it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Now let's get into our last segment here, and we'll start with, which I'm very keen to hear your answer. The John Williams of today, if you could give an advice to your younger self, what advice would that be? And how old the younger John Williams would be when he would be receiving this advice?
Okay. Younger John Williams would be probably 17, 18. And the advice would be try more, fail more.
Well, love it. I love it. Thank you. All right. Now, last rapid fire, 10 questions. Try to answer with as few words as you can. If one, even better. One word to describe yourself as a person.
Driven.
One word to describe yourself as a coach.
Progressive.
What are you most proud of in life?
My family.
What are you most proud of in tennis?
The opportunities.
What's your current dream?
To live a life worthy of remembering.
What do you consider yourself an advocate for?
Self-mastery.
An athlete or coach you look up to?
That's a tough one because, I look up to an athlete or a coach. I'd have to say an athlete.
Anyone specific?
Number 23. The true number 23. MJ.
Okay. Do you have a sport or team you keep up with outside of tennis?
I'm going to say no, because I'm not an advocate follower of anything, but I keep my finger on the pulse of motorsports, MotoGP and Formula One.
A favorite book or podcast that you would recommend someone to listen, read?
Favorite podcast? I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I do recommend it quite a bit. Finding Mastery by Michael Gervais. Favorite book? If they're a leader, can I break this up into categories?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. If a leader, the book Legacy is amazing. I would strongly recommend that. It's all about building culture that sustains excellence and lasts through time. If you're an individual, recommend The Daily Stoic. 365 days of a bit of wisdom, a digestible bit of wisdom every day, that if you apply it, if you dedicate yourself to applying it to your life, you will see an immediate change.
Awesome. And last one, is there a quote, philosophy, mantra that you want to share or that you live by?
Yes, this was hanging on the wall of every gym except my first one, but I corrected it after that. If I accept you as you are, then I limit you. But if I treat you based on what I believe you can become, then I help you become that.
Oh. John, thank you. What an amazing conversation. Really happy that you're able to join us, share your journey in so many different areas of your life as an entrepreneur, as a visionary, as a coach, as a father. It's been so great to see you and Taylor's journey through socials. I think people can easily digest. So if you have not followed John and Taylor, please do so. Good luck with everything that you have in these upcoming months. But I really appreciate that you took the time to chat before this.
Thank you, Yannick. It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy chatting with you, and for us to be able to do it on your platform. It's awesome.
And thank you everyone for listening. Please follow the podcast here. Make sure you follow us on social media at Unboxed Sports. See you next time.
Ciao.